Hello everyone. Thanks for joining me. I just got back from a road trip to Yellowstone. We were there last year in July, but this year we went end of September, 1st of October, and I came back with lots and lots of painting reference material, and I'm excited to get going on one of those tonight. As you can see, I start with an underpainting. This is on UArt paper, and I like to use a dark background sometimes. I call it kind of an ugly background. Here I'm just blocking in the design, finding the placement of the different elements of the landscape. Yellowstone in the fall is quite magical. There's a wonderful scene to be painted around every corner. Right now I'm just trying to get the design down. This will be a small little river that winds in around an open field, and then in the distance, as you can see right there, it's a little bit more of the river in the distance. Just putting in some indication of the distant tree line there. I plan on making that distant mountain very abstract. And here you'll see that again, I will start with a little bit darker blue in that little river. So it's a little darker blue, but knowing that I will go back in and probably do a mid-tone and then maybe a lighter blue, just depending on how it looks according to the areas around it. Here I'm using a deep, deep dark blue, just putting in some indications of the trees on the hillside. I want to keep it very abstract because I don't want to draw your eye into the background other than just for a short time. Here I'm adding some neutral color to the distance. Remember to use your neutrals. Your neutral colors make your other colors just pop. So get those neutrals out and use them, experiment with them. You can always pull them off if you don't like what it looks like. Just pulling off a little bit of that lighter pastel that I blocked it in with. Adding a little bit warmer color here. Always remember to give your viewers a way into your painting. As you can see, I added that little bit of blue on the left. That's one way to bring your eye into the painting, as you'll see on down as we get further into this piece. Working now on the mid distance, putting some deep rust in there. The fun part about having an underpainting is that you can leave some of that peeking through. That's why you put it there, is to enhance your painting and let some of it show through. This underpainting I used a little bit of a stamping effect where I made some designs with a stamp while my underpainting was still wet. And so when you look close at the finished painting, you'll be able to see some little circles and some little squiggly points. Right here I'm working on this little cliff here on the right hand side. The weather was perfect. We had 75 to 80 degree weather during the day, and then it dropped down to low 50s at night. And that's why we got all of these wonderful fall colors. some of which you'll see in this piece. Most of the time I use the side of my pastel to lay on the color. It gives me a broader, looser stroke. I also do a good amount of mark making. And you'll see that I use a stick, something that I just picked up outside. Use that stick to go in and make marks and scribble on the surface. You can do that with this UArt paper. It takes a lot of abuse. And the fun thing about mark making using a stick like this is that it also leaves a little bit of an indentation, so that when you go over it with other colors, the color skips. And then I use a comb. Gives me some random lines. And again, you can't get those any other way. Don't be afraid to mess up your surface a little bit. Create a little bit of chaos. You can always rein it in. Now here I have picked up black. Don't be afraid to use black in your painting, in your landscapes. A lot of artists are afraid to use black because they think there's no black in the landscape. Well, you're making a painting, right? So in my book, anything goes. A lot of this black that I'm putting down will be partially or completely covered up. It's just getting some depth in there and giving a little bit more contrast. See how that changes it already? Laying in some sagebrush down here at the bottom. Yellowstone is covered with sagebrush. Reminds me of the area that we live here in central Washington. We've got a lot of sagebrush. I love sagebrush. I love the smell of it. We have some up here behind our house. I love the color of it. That dusty turquoise color. When I work on a painting, I work over the entire surface. I'm always comparing the different areas to each other. If I lay in a color on the right-hand side, I more often than not will put a little bit of that color on the left-hand side or up on the top. It's a good way to keep your eye moving around the picture plane. You'll notice that a lot of my strokes are really quite abstract. I'm not putting in a whole bunch of detail. I'm just relying on happy little accidents. It's one of my mottos. Watch for those happy accidents and don't cover them up. They say that everyone will create a masterpiece in their lifetime, but most artists don't know when to stop and they cover it up. So make sure you learn how to critique your own work and don't cover up the magic. I do use a brush once in a while to take off a stroke that I might not like, or to blend it. Here comes some of the fun part, going in with some mid-tones, some of those fall colors you see in the background. You can look out at the distance there in Yellowstone and see these little spots of bright orange in among the dark trees. I think maybe my next painting might be of the quaking aspen. I think they're quaking aspen or birch. I think they're aspen. I love their bright white trunks against the dark background, and then the bright orange and yellow. Such a great contrast. Putting in some of the dirt here beside the river. This little part comes around, winds in around this little part of the landscape. And as you can see, I'm leaving quite a bit of the underpainting showing through. Adding some more darks. And adding some lavender in there, some mauve. If I add it in one place in the painting, I like to add it in another. Keeps your eye moving around. Be sure to stand back from your work every now and then and look at it from a distance. Looks a lot different from 10 feet back than it does from 2 feet. Here I'm working on the sagebrush in the foreground, putting in some of that wonderful sagebrush color, that dusty greenish blue. Checking on the design again. How does your eye follow that river around, and then the distance little sliver of a river pulls your eye in back behind there? This area needs to be modified just a little bit. It's got that little point back there. Anytime you make a point, your eye is pulled back to that area. So I don't really want the eye to get pulled back there and to stay there. I just want you to enjoy that background, but come back to the mid and foreground. I'll take my brush and knock that down just a little bit. Getting rid of that point. Knocking down some of those colors so that they're not quite so obvious. She's coming along. I like some of that mid-ground. Yep, so we are putting in just a little bit of detail here, a few highlights. Remember, you have to figure out how much is enough and not overdo it. I'm going to work on this hillside just a little bit, and the brush coming in from the right hand side. Gives your eye another way to come in and around. Use color to do that. Color and line, contrast, to pull your eye around in your painting. I'm trying to figure out what color I want to go next on that little river. Do I want turquoise? Do I want blue? Nope. And then I crumble the pastel. That's okay. It still works. And here I've gone with a mid-tone blue, a little bit lighter than the dark that I originally put on. Just gradually making it lighter, seeing how far I want to go with the value. It's all about value. try this brighter turquoise. See what happens. You're looking at intensity and color. And I didn't quite like that, so I'm taking it off. Just take your brush and pull that color off. It's very easy on this UArt paper. So I've gone back to the blue, a little bit lighter blue. Just a few strokes and you have a sparkling stream. And again, going just a little bit lighter, putting in some of those little sparkles from the sun reflecting on the water. Just be careful you don't overdo it. And in the back here, where the sun really catches that in the distance. My goal is to actually go back to Yellowstone and do some plein air. Putting on these little sparkles is quite fun. Put them on and then knock them down so they're not too much in your face. Time for some more color. Looking for the right value to put in that little piece of sandbar in behind there. You just put your stick down and turn it like this and make the shape. Put the shape down and leave it. I really like that color. I'm going to put a little bit of that here in the foreground. To repeat that color, the sandiness. Again, using the same colors in different areas moves your eye around. Remember to utilize your neutral colors. They're so effective. Especially your mid-tones. I'm looking for the right value to work on that little cliff hillside there. And now I'm adding just a little bit of blue to tone down that rust color on that little island. See how that makes it set just a little bit better. I'm looking now at the shapes of the rocks on that hillside. And another great tool is an old kitchen towel. You can use it to scrub, you can use it to put in some texture, and more often than not, I use it to clean my pastel stick before I put the stroke on. So I always have it on the left arm, my left arm, and whenever I pick up a new stick of pastel, I just take and wipe that side off to make sure that it's clean. Here I'm adding a little bit more dark under the little island there. Every once in a while I use my finger to smudge or to push back the pastel. I don't use a lot of blending per se, but I do work the edges a little bit. And now I'm trying to get back to that cliff to add a little more color there. Finding the right value, I'll take a stick and put it up next to the painting to see if it's the right value. Just random shapes will suggest your rocks. This is a little bit of a dark neutral mauve color. And now I'm going back in with my trusty stick to add some more mark making. You may not be able to see it from where you're sitting, but at the end, when you see the close-up, you'll be able to see some of those strokes. I'm going in with a few reflections. The deep blue. And I'm adding some of that deep blue to the cliff. If you have never been to Yellowstone Park, you owe it to yourself to take a week and visit the different areas. This is down in Lamar Valley. We stayed up in Tom Minor Basin, which is south of Livingston, and from there it's only about, I think, 20 miles down to the entrance of Yellowstone. Just using my little stump here to do just a tiny bit of blending. Adding a little bit of variation of value to the edge of that shore to make it look like pebbles or rocks, clumps of dirt. Now I'm looking for a brighter value for this section of the river. Here, always looking at your values and comparing one area to another. And that's where standing back helps. You stand back and take a look. You'll be able to judge your values better and know what needs to go on. Here's a little bit of highlight on that river in the background. And you'll see I go even brighter back there, but not too bright. And just a stroke of the finger blends it into the background and pushes it back. A few more details in the foreground. Those wonderful neutral grays and browns. Doing just a little bit of blending with that brush. Now I'm looking for the next layer that's going on the river. It needs to be lighter, brighter. And when you find that, just commit and put it down and leave it. See how that works? A few strokes up front. Few more highlights there on the cliff. Gives it the impression of more rocks, jagged rocks on the hillside. There's the center of attention there. Brings your eye up into the back. And then you come back down and around. And here you want to continue your eye off to the left there. Just gives you another place for your eye to enter the painting, to bring your eye in and around the center of interest. And that river in the back. Such a simple stroke, but so effective. Adding a little bit more color to the middle ground, the shrubs and grasses. Very simply done. And I bring out my comb again. That comb is fun. I think it's actually a house painter's tool to clean brushes with. But hey, get your mark making tools from anywhere, right? And a few more details to the foreground. Reshaping the shoreline there a little bit. Pay attention to your edges. Your edges are very important. Adding just a little bit of light in the background. Watch this stroke. Stroke and leave it. I don't really like this area down here in the bottom left where the sagebrush is, so I'm going to go in with my dark pastel and just change the shapes just a little bit. And that's all you need. Add some more sagebrush color. And that's all you need right there. Putting just a little bit of detail in those grasses. Now I've got a little bit of green here, adding a little bit of warmth. It's a warm green. If I add it there, I'm going to add a little bit back here. You're still seeing quite a bit of green in the landscape. She's coming along nicely. Adding just a little bit more bling, a little more sparkle. Tantalizing the eye a little bit. Your stump is just great for making some grasses, more mark making, moving the pastel around, and of course the comb. pushing that comb into the pastel and creating texture. I think you can see that I just did there. And there we have it. There's the finished piece. You can see the dark, deep blue in the background and that little cliff on the right-hand side. It's all quite abstract. It's a feast for the eyes. Lots going on, and yet the design is quite simple. Thanks for joining me.